Section 3.2, the slope of a line. What is the slope of the line? Well, the slope of the line is a ratio of the vertical change over the horizontal change. So vertical change over horizontal change. We also call it possibly the rise over the run. So it's equaling the rise, how far are you going up or down, compared to the run, how far are you going left and right. So when you think of a slope, you want to think about going up or down first, then left or right. There are 4 different kinds of slopes you could have. You could have a positive slope, and the reason why this is a positive slope is because it's going up from left to right. You could also have a negative slope, and that means it's going down from left to right. You could also have a horizontal line which has a 0 slope. It's not going up or down, it's going straight across. So we say it has a slope of 0. Now what happens if you're going vertical? Well, there is a change in y, but there's no horizontal change. So that means there's an undefined slope. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Since you are going up and down, you have a vertical change. However, since you have no horizontal change, you have a 0 in the denominator of a fraction. You're never allowed to have 0 in the denominator. That gives you undefined. So therefore you have an undefined slope. But if we go back to the slope of 0 with a horizontal line, what does that mean? Well, you have a change horizontally, but in the numerator, the vertical change would be 0. 0 on top is okay. 0 on bottom is not. So just know if a 0 is on top, your slope is 0, which means you'd have a horizontal line. If you have a vertical line, your slope is undefined, which means that would give you a 0 in the denominator. To determine the slope of the line, you actually have 2 options. If you're given an equation, put the equation to slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. How does that help us find the slope? Well, the slope is a number in front of x. So we would be able to find the slope if you're given an equation. However, what if you're given 2 points? If you're given 2 points, you'll use the formula of the change in y over the change in x. So you're going to subtract the y values on top over the subtraction of the x values. So again, the change in y over the change in x. Determine the slope of a line given, number 1, y equaling 2/5 x minus 2. Well, it's given an equation, so we're going to have to use the first option. It's already in the form of y equals mx plus b, so all we need to do is take the number in front of x. So my slope is 2/5. On the second problem, we're given an equation, so we're still going to use option 1. However, it's not in the right form. Our form has to be slope-intercept, so it has to be in y equals. So we'll have to subtract 5x on both sides first. That gives us a negative 3y equaling negative 5x plus 12. We need to get y by itself, so we'll divide by negative 3 on every term. Every term gets divided by negative 3. So we'll end up with y equaling, 2 negatives make a positive, so I get 5x over 3, and 12 divided by negative 3 is a negative 4, so I end up with a minus 4. To find the slope, I will look at the number in front of x. It is a fraction, so my slope will be 5/3. For number 3, we're actually given a graph. So I'm not given 2 points, I'm not given an equation, I'm given a graph. How do I find the slope given a graph? Well, we could use option 2, which is to find 2 points and use the formula. So let's pick 2 points from the graph. We know that the x-intercept, one of the points would be 7, 0. We also know that another point on the graph would be 3, 2. So this is what I will use as my x1, y1, x2, y2. I'll use this as x1, y1, and this point will be x2, y2. So plugging it into the formula, I'm going to have a 2 minus 0. In the denominator, I will have a 3 minus 7. So 2 minus 0 is 2, and 3 minus 7 is a negative 4. When we reduce that and bring the negative to the top, I end up with negative 1/2. So my slope is negative 1/2. Let's make sure that actually works. If we start at this point right here, we will go down 1 and to the right 2. Down 1 to the right 2, we still end up on our graph. So we actually could have just counted down and to the right and found our slope that way. A couple of different options if you're given a graph. Find 2 points and use a formula, or start at a point that you know on the graph and count up or down, left or right to get to the next point. Now let's find the slope given 2 points. For number 4, 2, 1 is our first point and negative 6, 3 is our second point. I will label these accordingly: x1, y1, x2, y2. So we'll use the formula for slope, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Plugging in the points that we have, that would give us a 3 minus 1 all over negative 6 minus 2. On top, we'd end up with a 2. In the denominator, we'd end up with a negative 8. We need to reduce 2 over negative 8, and that would reduce to a 4th. Again, the negative's not allowed to be left on bottom, so our final answer will be negative 1 over 4. Number 5. We'll label those points again. First point, x1, y1. Second point, x2, y2. We'll use the same formula. The more you write it, the more you remember it, so I'll write it again. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Plugging our values in, y2 is negative 3 minus a negative 6 over x2, which is negative 2 minus 4. Negative 3 minus a negative 6, that'll just turn into a plus sign, so we get a positive 3. Negative 2 minus 4 is a negative 6. Again, we need to reduce and bring the negative up to the numerator. So my slope will turn out to be negative 1/2. Number 6. We'll start off the same way. Label this as x1, y1 and x2, y2. We'll write our formula one more time. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Plugging in our values, we have a 5 minus a negative 4 all over 3 minus 3. So on top we end up with 5 plus 4, which is 9, and 3 minus 3 is 0. So looking back at our notes, what did we talk about when we had a 0 in the denominator? 0 in the denominator means our slope is undefined. So if I would have plotted these 2 points, I would see I would have a vertical line. So my slope is undefined. Again, you cannot divide by 0, so you have an undefined slope. Plot those 2 points on a coordinate plane. You'll see you have a vertical line. So number 7. Label these points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. Using our formula for the slope equaling y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Well, y2 is negative 1 minus a negative 1. So negative 1 minus a negative 1 all over 3 minus 4. Again, that's going to turn into a plus sign, so negative 1 plus 1 is 0, and 3 minus 4 is negative 1. Looking at our notes on the previous page, we see that when we have a 0 on top, our slope is just 0. So what kind of line does that mean? That means we would have a horizontal line.